Hello, everyone, and good afternoon to you, or it could be good late morning for you, depending on where you're joining us today. My name is Heather. I work with the ACSED programming team, and I'm really excited but sad at the same time in that this is our final session or webinar within the AX Foundation Building Block series that we're doing. And Jeff Stone with Merit Solutions has been very gracious to give us this series and lay out his knowledge in ways that would be very beneficial to our members. So we thank him, and like I said, I'm excited that this is the end for all of you to learn, and also sad at the same time. So hopefully we'll repeat something like this in the near future. But our today's topics are flexibility, outputs, and integrations. And like I said, Jeff works with Merit Solutions, who is a fantastic ACSED partner member of ours, and so we're very gracious for him to be sharing this today. So without much ado, Jeff, I'm going to turn things over to you.
Okay.
And while he's sharing his screen, I just want to make sure everybody is aware to please post your questions. That's what this is all about, so that you can learn. Post them. I'll address them at the end during Q&A. Also, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll unmute you. All right, Jeff, I can see your screen. It looks great.
Okay. Well, thanks, Heather.
Oh, sorry about that.
No problem. First of all, I was actually planning on doing a couple more, so maybe our schedules aren't aligned, but if you recall, I had a couple other sessions that we were going to hit after these. We're in the, going through the different building blocks of what makes a system success. But I did have another session planned later in the month around support and direction, basically how you can be working with your partners, and then a couple others about once you've seen all these different important areas in your system, how do you turn it around? If where do you even start when you're in trouble? And that's kind of what the final two sessions in May were going to be around.
You are
so
exactly
may not
right.
be done with me just yet.
I think I was counting my chickens before they hatched. So thanks for correcting me on that one.
No problem. So for the folks that haven't joined us previously, we've been talking a lot about I called it the big bad wolf theory, like what is your house made of, and the house of bricks is what you're looking for. We've talked about a lot of these already, the accessibility, training, performance, maintenance, put a lot of focus on those. Squeezing a lot of content in today with 5 through 8. There's usually a couple different sessions, but I'll go quickly, try and bring up as many things as possible, and then as Heather said, please put any comments you have in the chat window, and at the end we can try to figure out what's the most pertinent thing for the group to talk about. Really, my goal is just to foster that discussion. I'm not a professional sales facilitator or anything like that, but I lead our ongoing support at Merit Solutions, so I do see a lot of things that we inherit when we're working with new clients, and that's the idea of this session, or this whole series, I guess. All right, so jumping right in, talking about efficiency and flexibility today, as well as integrations and outputs. And as I've said about most of these building blocks, you can do everything else perfectly. You can get the system up and going, and everyone signs off and says it's exactly what they're looking for. But if it's not flexible, if it's not giving the users the types of efficient processes that they want, then you're just asking for trouble still down the road. Obviously, this is easier said than done. After the fact, you could always think about going back to the beginning and doing it differently. So if anybody's on the line that's still implementing, or thinking about implementing even, obviously there's a couple different approaches from the start that I'd say you want to go with one of them and not get stuck in the middle. I'd say first is just going straight vanilla, trying to get done using the standard processes. These ERP tools are designed to be compliant systems that promote processes that are many industry standards. The more you go astray from that, or try to customize, or try to shoe fit your own processes into some of these systems, that's not what they're intended for. Now there is the other approach of, do you try to think about every possible scenario from the beginning and really configure and customize, integrate, do as much as you can to adhere to your old company's processes from the start. We're getting a lot more push these days on doing the first one, which is just get me AX up and going. People want AX in Azure on the cloud as fast as possible, and then they will worry about changing and if they determine that their business processes can't fit into it. And that's kind of a direction we've been going a lot lately. Merit actually has an offering now we call Accelerate, where it's about 90% of the way configured for most companies, even with a GL structure, a chart of accounts and everything. We can throw in a few of our favorite customizations we've done over the years for other clients and kind of have a starting point that could work for many companies. I see the opposite, though. We worked with a client recently where they've been live for a year. They called us up to basically see if we could help them out with some of the problems they're having. They had 2 different ISV products that they didn't even know they had installed and weren't using. I mean, they had paid for some demand forecasting tool that their previous partner put in place, put a forecast in, but nobody knew how to modify it. Nobody was really relying on it. So it was just a terrible example of not knowing what the real needs are and not trying to make the system efficient for you. So I guess the other thing is thinking ahead and making sure that you're doing things flexible, making sure that you're going to be able to adapt to changing processes or if you purchase a new company or whatever else might be. We see that a lot too. Companies have went live, but they're not able to adapt when they need to, and end up resorting to other manual workarounds or things outside the system anyway. So on that note, what does AX kind of give you? If you haven't, most of us on the call are already users. It's a little too late to go back and say, let's do it over again. But some of the things you can do, you can confirm with your partner that you have these in place. A lot of this is going to be common sense to some of you, but using the financial dimensions appropriately, this is one of the most common things we see for some reason with the new AX implementations, that people just hadn't thought through the use of their dimensions enough. We've seen people that still have separate GL accounts for every customer, and knowing that that can be a dimension with one click, it's pretty frustrating to see that they're not getting as much as they can out of the system. Things around virtual companies with shared data. So they have multiple companies, multiple legal operating entities, and there's a lot of redundant data in the system. Maybe they haven't realized that you can set up virtual companies and share pieces of information across different entities. Things like just some of the other configurations in your production processes. We have people that complain because they have to start, or whatever it is, release and start production orders. There's 2 different steps, and nobody has told them that there are some configurable options where you can streamline some of those things and do both steps at once. Trying to think of some other examples. I mean, we have people that have even enabled or not enabled something like negative inventory. And in most cases, you might think you don't want your system to allow for inventory to go negative. But we have some clients with very long lead times and lots of alternate raw materials in stock, and some crazy ways that they do their production processes where they're okay with having inventory go negative so that it doesn't stop every other transaction that they're doing that day, and they know what's going on with their safety stock, things like that. So those would be the types of configurations that you should be talking with your partner to say, okay, well, we've seen it one way, we've seen the standard way that AX usually does this, but for the headaches that we're going to be seeing because of that, are there other configurable ways without customizing to get around that? One topic I put in here was with 2012 R3, there are a couple cool MDM, master data management utilities that were included to synchronize data a little bit more across different entities, I guess, or different technologies even. So they have these, that come ready to ship with customers and vendors, employees, and parties and products. That, Microsoft knows that you might have another system that is your system of record for some of these things. If you think about, there's companies that have whole huge engineering systems with different change request processes, and but that serves as their true product master, and then maybe that feeds AX. Well, there's kind of some shortcuts you can take with this R3 version of MDM that help you to synchronize those a little better. Same with customers, vendors, employees. So before you, I say configure first, and then look at other, built-in interface tools, and then final choice is always to customize. As far as a couple examples of when customizing would make sense. So yeah, here's what I said. Trying to put that round peg into the square hole can quickly add up to a lot of wasted time and ultimately dollars, right? Not everything needs to be in AX, even though we're the AX user group and we want a single system with all integration points. Just goes back to being efficient. If it doesn't support your process, then sometimes it is better to either have an interface or to take that extra click and live with it in the system. We've seen so many examples. My favorite is a partner of or a client of ours. They had a screen called the Easy Screen, and it was intended to have multiple, basically the whole life of production and inventory management in this one dashboard screen where you could check on everything and interact with MRP and interact with production orders. And so it's called the Easy Screen, and it's the most complicated form I've ever seen in any technology. So it's just become a mess over time. But users are all wanting to work in it, and it becomes easy to, when we have a release and there's a piece of code that touches the Easy Screen, everyone's on pins and needles for the next 2 weeks to see if anything is broken. It just becomes such a tough thing to manage, and they're already talking about how they don't know how we're going to possibly upgrade it, and it's a re-implementation someday when we go to whatever, AX7. So you have to be thinking about not only short-term but long-term when you're doing customizations to make sure that it's appropriate, you can manage it. Basically all those other building blocks we talked about earlier, how are you going to support this, how are you going to manage it. Trying to think of some other good examples. On the other hand, we do have some good examples where we had a client that every time they do a report is finished in a certain warehouse, they put something in a stock, the first thing they do is they put it on a transfer order and they send it over to another warehouse. So we were able to automate that process where they could basically open up a transfer order before they start. That's make it like a shell of an empty transfer order. You just have your source and destination, and then throughout the week, as soon as everything they produce that week is automatically getting put into stock with a report is finished journal, but then immediately also issued on to this transfer order. Then at the end of the week, literally they've packed up this whole crate. They're just going to move it over to ship it to their warehouse. They can ship the transfer order and it all shows in transit, and they didn't have to go and issue all those materials that they just produced by these are lot controlled items as well. So it would have been somewhat tedious to do. But that was, in my mind, a good example of, okay, yeah, this is a pretty defined process. We can customize it, save a lot of time, not necessarily get into the guts of other processes. It was more on the tail end after something else completed, doing something else, and we felt confident with going forward being able to support that. Other, let's say, popular integrations that I would say to explore and not feel too worried about. We see these would be true integrations, really, not customizations, but pushing data in from other systems that hold payroll or time and expense information. We work with medical companies that have timekeeping and health records. In this case, it makes perfect sense to pull in just the minimal amounts we can from other systems, with a nice DMF interface or web services, something like that. Dynamics to Dynamics, there's some cool tools if you're using CRM outside of AX. There's the connector that they've built, pushing in orders from one entity or one system to the other. That makes perfect sense. Definitely EDI. There's third-party vendors out there. I have worked at least with one company where we built it for them from scratch, but most of the time it's partnering with one of the ISVs out there that has a tool to manage those transactions between yourself and your vendors, your customers. But yeah, those efforts, you can see the return on investment pretty quickly. Yeah, you're going to spend some money to get this up and going, but you're going to have more accurate, more timely transactions going through the system. So those are the types of projects that we certainly promote for our clients. We're, like I said, it's configure first, then we'll say partner with a tool that's already done it, and then last resort is customize, at least for us. Now I say that, but we also have a mobile part of our organization that is, when you have to do that customization, there's some cool things that you can do. And the Microsoft platform now, I'm actually amazed at how few apps still exist for R3 even. I have some links at the end that I'll share which shows a lot of the details with some of these topics. But I thought for sure when they started to come out with the apps for R3, they have time and expense, they have a shop floor one, not too much else. I thought for sure there was going to be an app for everything, and that was going to be the direction Microsoft was going. It really hasn't materialized that way. And even AX7, when you look at it, even though it has more of a tile look and feel, it's not designed as, it's still the same R3 functionality with a little facelift in my mind. And it's more web driven, obviously, but it's not apps that somebody could have. And I still think there could be a lot of opportunity for that in production field especially, and field service. I mean, we've worked with some of our clients. We work with Stanley Steamer, for example. We do all their mobile tablet work when they're dispatch center and all that stuff. But we also then interact with AX and pass things back and forth. So I guess that would be another, my own suggestion is, if it's something where it really doesn't need to be built in X++ to interact with AX, then that's how we try to position it, is kind of compartmentalize these things like a field service app or a sales reporting suite that you build. Those type of things, as nice as it is to have everything in one system, someday your accounting system could change, or your reporting suite could change, and by having pieces and parts that can interact, we've found at least that lends to more flexible outcomes for our clients. I'm not going to go too far into this. I mean, I think there's a lot of different items you can go. You can spend a whole day talking about EDI transactions and what to do and what not to do. I will say this is where we have seen examples too where an EDI is one of our examples. We had a client that was trying to, they did their 810s, 850, 856, which are the standard POs and invoices, and then they tried to model with EDI one of their production processes, and it got so complicated that the exception handling that had to occur took more time than if they were just done everything manually from the beginning. So you have to kind of weigh some of these things too. It's not always the best bet to use a new technology or to use an interface just because it's technically possible. And that's exactly what I was just saying. So your considerations, make sure you have the return on investment, the impact on the other building blocks. See if I missed anything here. Got to make sure that you have users that understand it. So if you do put an interface in place, that's usually an IT task, right? So you have your IT department build something, and maybe if you're lucky, you get good exception handling out of it, or some logging and reporting that makes sense to a business user. But oftentimes you are reliant on an IT resource to figure out what happened when something goes wrong. So that is a big gotcha that we say, make sure when you're doing anything with integrations and customizations that you really document it well and have people that understand how to troubleshoot when something inevitably goes wrong, a service is stopped, or whatever else could happen with some of these systematic integrations. All right, so that's flexibility, efficiency, integrations. The other big one that I wanted to hint on today, as I mentioned earlier, each of these topics could be a whole hour, but the types of outputs and what AX has to offer, where the direction people are going. What we see the most is people get their critical outputs defined from the beginning as part of the project. So yes, we have a purchase order we can send out, and we know how to run our aging reports to figure out who owes us money. But then everything else kind of gets on that phase 2 list. So, hey, we'll figure that out once we start going. And 3 weeks later, 3 months later, there's people scrambling that they can't get the data they need out of the system. So this is another one of those areas that we try to, whether it's our own implementation or coming in fresh from somebody, try to make sure that we put a good focus on these areas from the beginning as much as possible to figure out how do you really get to some of those other, we'll call them secondary reports, but it's really what is going to keep your users happy, and you need to have a strategy of how you're going to do this. So that's kind of the first caution, is don't wait till the end if you're not live yet to focus on some of these things. But really what I wanted to talk about a little bit more is what is the right answer for some of this, the everything else list. I mean, there's so many options available, so many different strategies, and just to name a few, so you have, well, actually I'll show a chart that I found that Microsoft had. So basically you have your different categories. You know, is this just a one-time query just trying to get kind of ad hoc data? Is it something for reporting purposes, or is it something for analysis? And really with each of these, you know, there's just some of the examples, but there's many tools, and this is really just the Microsoft set. There's a bunch of other third-party tools and custom things you can do. And what we find is that clients don't have a strategy on what they're going to go for. So even if it's not ideal, you need to have some type of guidance for your people that, hey, we're going to use the Microsoft Excel add-in for AX. We're going to make that our ad hoc query tool. And we're going to get people trained in it, and we're going to, you know, invest in learning that one. Or maybe it's, you know, there's third-party tools out there. I don't know if I'll hold off from naming on any of them just because, not to play favorites or anything, but we've found that lately, especially, Power BI is a tool that is evolving and that we're seeing a lot of cool things with as far as the dashboards. That's what this screenshot is, and I have a link, this typo and missing link here. It's at the end, but it'll share kind of how to get started with Power BI and AX, especially if you're using a hosted or an Azure solution. Power BI is all web-based, and what we really like about it is you can point it to not only AX but other data sources and then combine some things. So the example I was talking about earlier where we had somebody that tried to have their whole demand forecast done in AX, and it was just, it was that square peg in the round hole. Just the way they do things with these long lead times. It was an apparel manufacturer, and they have these initial forecasts that are like 18 to 24 months out, and then they kind of hone it in as they determine exactly what styles they're going to come out with in the next year. But they don't really relate directly to sales orders, and it was a different type of forecasting. In any case, what we're doing now is they can tap into their, you know, system is a rough word, but it's basically an Excel sheet that they've managed for years that they have some good historical data in. We can tap into that, pull that in, and then compare it to AX true data and sales forecasts and see, you know, how things are working with the, you know, pretty easy connectors that something like Power BI offers. You know, you have that's kind of the one extreme though, trying to get the dashboards and, you know, data from all over the place. There's a lot of good uses for other tools as well though, and I don't want to downplay those. So AX, by default, a lot of this stuff is SSRS, and, you know, customizing those is not the easiest thing. It's really more of a development task. But for a lot of the reports, if it's something that is doing what it needs to, there are good ways to automate those being spit out every day to a certain file location, or even to the email. I have some links at the end that talk about that. It's, you know, most of our clients that we work with didn't realize that you can do some of those things, so I made sure to put those at the end. Something like Management Reporter, we have clients that are using AX every day financials and don't use Management Reporter, and it kind of blows my mind because they make it so easy to spit out those balance sheets and income statements and then drill into the details, which is, you know, we have people that are trying to do that by exporting out of lists and, you know, of thousands and hundreds of thousands of transactions. So MR has its benefits, and even in the more recent versions, I forget exactly what version, but they finally put in where you can connect through to some of the AP and AR information, so it's not strictly GL. You can at least see the, you know, vendor or customer number or invoice numbers from within MR on some of these reports. So that's definitely still a powerful tool. Let's see. So yeah, a couple of screenshots. Here's a, I guess this is really more talking about ad hoc. So what do people do for ad hoc, right? You have the cubes is what I was going for here. So the cubes that come with AX is another tool where you can get to some pretty quick analysis, and this is what we push our people to. By hitting the cubes, you're not hitting production data live. It's typically a nightly refresh, and you don't have to worry about doing, hardcore analysis against the production data and slowing anything down. It really comes down to Excel pivot tables, right? And we've done things like vendor spend by month or daily sales summary. And a couple of these, by default, the cubes may not show all of this stuff. So, we've even created what we call mini cubes, which is we just want something that's going to, most of the cubes are still financial related. So sales would be really what's been invoiced, not open sales orders. If that makes sense. So it's kind of GL based. So we've done things where we try to pull in a secondary. Okay, just show me all my, open purchase orders or open sales orders, and then we can compare. Okay, what's really been invoiced to what's still open. So it may take a little bit of work with your partner to define a couple more data sources, but once you have those, we've had a lot of success with pointing our people towards the cubes and handling the Excel add-in for the ad hoc data analysis. All right, so here's a bunch of links that I have kind of hinted on. I have some things out here with some are more technical than others with integration. But even the report catalog, people don't realize what reports come with AX by default. So I have a link to that. I mentioned a couple things about SSRS with report archiving and sending the email. So there's a couple of good links there. I didn't even mention this one, but we have clients that use the project module of AX, and there's some cool integrations with Microsoft Project Server, where you can integrate through if you have a project plan and have that actually do something in AX in the project module. There's a similar tool now in LCS, I believe, so if you're doing everything online, there's some other integration points as well. Companion apps is what I was talking about as far as the mobile things that are available today. A few of the apps around expenses for sure. If you have a shop floor, kind of time, clock in, clock out. So those are apps that are built that you can, if you're using AX for your own company's time and expenses, people might not even realize there's an app for that you can share with your team. All right, so at this point I would usually have a ton of questions and spend the next half hour on going through what people are finding, what challenges they have. We only have a few minutes, but if there's anything, Heather, that you've seen, we can start to discuss it. Or what I'm thinking is even on my next session, support and direction, I can chop that down a little bit and maybe come back with some answers on, if there's anything that people want to discuss a little bit further today.
Sure, yeah. So I have been watching the questions dashboard. I don't see anything in there yet, but a lot of times you'll see some things trickle in once the presentation's over. So feel free to post something in there. I'll certainly propose that to Jeff. And then also, feel free to raise your hand. So if you actually want to ask your question as opposed to typing it, we'd love to have you actually sound it. But we'll love to hear your voice. So. Let's see. And then as Jeff has graciously done, he's included his contact information. So if you have attended today's webinar, maybe it's just a proactive step you're taking before you actually need some of this information, or you share it with others in your office and there's questions that come about, feel free to reach out to him as well. Also feel compelled to post those questions in the content library, because then when the answer comes about and somebody comes and searches this up, maybe a year from now, they too can gain some knowledge from your question and seeing the answer. So just a good practice to have. I don't see anything coming through. And just to remind everybody as well, this was recorded, so you will get a link to this recording. It'll get sent right to your email. You won't have to look for it. You'll get the recording and the presentation deck. And it will take, just about 30 minutes or so once we're done. All right. Actually, we didn't get a question, but KH did say thank you. So thank you.
All right, no problem.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and conclude today's webinar. Again, if any questions come about, you certainly know how to find Jeff. He's got his information out there. He's a brave soul. So thanks, everybody, for attending, and we'll see you on the next webinar. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Have a good one.